The champagne glass slipped from my hand as my wife's voice echoed through the wedding hall in Kampala. 300 guests fell silent. My heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. You know what's truly amusing? Amara's voice rang out, dripping with a cruelty I'd never heard before. She stood there in her expensive wedding gown, microphone in hand, looking more like a queen delivering judgment than a bride celebrating love. I married a man who owns exactly 2 pairs of trousers. In 3 years of dating, I've seen the same worn-out clothes recycled over and over again. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Uncomfortable, nervous laughter. Some people looked at me with pity, others with judgment. I sat there at the head table, my hands trembling, watching the woman I'd loved for 3 years humiliate me in front of everyone we knew. But don't worry, she continued, her smile sharp as broken glass. I'm a patient woman. I'll teach him how to dress properly, how to carry himself, how to be the man I deserve. She raised her glass. To my project husband. May he finally learn what it means to be successful. The applause was scattered and weak. My throat burned with unshed tears. My chest felt like someone had reached in and squeezed my heart until it burst. This was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. Instead, it was my public execution. What Amara didn't know, what nobody in that room knew except me, was that every word she spoke was building toward a revelation that would shatter her world into a million pieces. The secret I'd kept for 3 years was about to explode. And Karma? Karma was wearing a wedding dress, dancing on her own grave, completely unaware that the ground beneath her feet was already crumbling. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this story really begins. My name is Tendai and I was born into wealth I never asked for. My father, Chikir, built an empire across East Africa, telecommunications, real estate, banking. By the time I turned 25, I had more money in my trust fund than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. I lived in Nairobi in a penthouse that overlooked the entire city. I drove cars that cost more than houses. I wore watches that could feed a village for a year. And I was absolutely miserable. Not because having money is inherently bad, I'm not foolish enough to pretend poverty is noble. But because I could never escape one haunting question. Did anyone actually love me or did they just love what I could give them? My girlfriend at the time, a beautiful woman named Zuri, seemed perfect. She said all the right things. She laughed at my jokes. She held my hand and whispered that she'd love me even if I had nothing. Then one night, I came home early from a business trip and found her in bed with my business partner, laughing about how boring I was but how she couldn't leave because the money is too good. That night broke something fundamental inside me. I looked at my entire life, my friends, my relationships, my social circle, and realized I couldn't trust a single person's motives. Everyone wanted something from me. Everyone was performing. Everyone was acting like they cared while secretly calculating what they could extract from my wealth. My father died 3 months later. Sudden. Unexpected. A heart attack in the middle of a business meeting in Lagos. I held his hand as he took his last breath, and in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I contacted my lawyers and created an elaborate plan. I would place my entire inheritance, every single shilling, every property, every investment, into an ironclad trust. For 5 years, I would receive only a modest monthly stipend, just enough to live like an average person. The rest would be completely inaccessible to me, managed by trustees who had strict instructions not to reveal my true financial situation to anyone. Then I would disappear. Leave Nairobi. Leave my old life. Start over in a new city where nobody knew my name or my family. I would work ordinary jobs, live in ordinary places, date ordinary people. And I would finally discover if genuine love without conditions, without calculations, without greed, actually existed. My mother, Ayana, thought I'd lost my mind. Tendai, this is insane, she pleaded with tears in her eyes. You can't just throw away your life because one woman betrayed you. Not everyone is like Zuri. Then I'll find out, won't I? I replied calmly. If true love exists, 5 years of living as a normal person should reveal it. And if it doesn't exist, then at least I'll know the truth. She couldn't stop me. Nobody could. I was 26 years old, grieving my father, and determined to answer a question that had been eating away at my soul. So I moved to Kampala with 2 suitcases and a new identity. Not literally, I kept my real name and documents, but I became a different version of myself. Tendai the heir became Tendai the nobody. I rented a small room in Nakua, a working-class neighborhood where the rent was cheap and the walls were thin. I got a job at a mobile phone shop earning barely enough to cover my expenses. I bought my clothes from second-hand markets. I learned to budget, to save, to understand what it meant when you had to choose between buying meat or paying your electricity bill on time. And for the first time in my life, I became invisible. Nobody stared at me when I walked down the street. Nobody wanted my autograph or my business card or my investment advice. I was just another young man trying to make it in the city, and that anonymity felt like breathing fresh air after years of drowning. I spent 18 months like this. Working. Living simply. Learning what real life felt like for most people. I made friends with my coworkers. Genuine friendships built on shared jokes and mutual struggles rather than what I could do for them. I ate at cheap restaurants and discovered that food tastes better when you've actually worked hard to afford it. I rode crowded matatus and learned that dignity isn't determined by whether you can afford a private car. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon that seemed completely ordinary, a woman walked into the phone shop and changed everything. She was arguing with her friend about which phone had the better camera. Her voice was loud and confident, her laugh infectious and genuine. She wore a simple yellow dress that probably cost very little but looked beautiful on her. Her hair was braided in an intricate pattern that must have taken hours. When she caught me staring, she didn't blush or look away. She smiled, a smile that reached her eyes and seemed to light up the entire shop. "Can you help us settle this argument?" she asked, gesturing between two display phones. "My friend thinks this one is better, but I think she's wrong. Give us your professional opinion." Her name was Amara. She was 24 years old. She worked as a marketing assistant at a small firm in the city. She'd grown up in Barara, the daughter of a clerk and a seamstress, and she'd worked her way through university on scholarships and part-time jobs. She was smart, ambitious, beautiful, and when she laughed at my joke about how people photograph their food more than their families, I felt something I hadn't felt since before my father died. Oh, maybe, I thought as I watched her leave the shop that day, maybe this is it. Maybe she's the one who'll prove that real love exists. I had no idea how wrong I was. No idea how much pain was waiting for me. No idea that the woman I'd just met would eventually stand at our wedding and tear my heart into pieces in front of everyone I knew. But that would come later. First, there was the falling in love. Amara came back to the shop the following week. She claimed she had a question about her new phone settings, but we both knew it was just an excuse. I helped her anyway, taking more time than necessary, enjoying the way she leaned close to look at the screen, the subtle scent of her perfume, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. "You're different from the guys who usually try to talk to me," she said as we stood outside the shop after my shift ended. The Kampala evening was warm, the streets busy with people heading home from work. "You're quiet, thoughtful. Like you're always thinking about something deeper than what's right in front of you. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" I asked. "I haven't decided yet," she replied with a grin. "Buy me a mandazi and maybe I'll let you know." That's how it started. A mandazi at a street vendor. Then coffee at a small cafe. Then walks through the city as the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink. Then dinners at cheap restaurants where we'd share one plate because it was cheaper that way and neither of us had much money to spare, or so she thought. I fell in love with her slowly, like water soaking into dry earth. She was everything I'd hoped to find. She talked about her dreams of starting her own event planning business someday, of being successful on her own terms, of never having to worry about money the way her parents had. She was honest about wanting financial security, but she framed it as ambition rather than greed, and I admired that. "I don't need to be rich," she told me one evening as we sat in my small apartment, sharing a simple meal of rice and beans I'd cooked. "I just need to know I'll never be poor. There's a difference. Poverty steals your dignity, Tendai. It makes you small in ways that have nothing to do with money and everything to do with how people treat you." I understood that. I'd seen it in the past months, how people treated me differently now that I appeared to have nothing. The subtle disrespect. The assumptions. The way some people looked through me rather than at me. "You'll get there," I assured her, squeezing her hand. "You're smart and hardworking. Success is inevitable for people like you." She kissed me then, soft and sweet, and whispered, "I'm lucky I found you. Someone who sees me for who I really am." The irony of those words would haunt me later. But in that moment, I believed them. I believed everything was perfect. We dated for a year before I started noticing the small cracks. Nothing obvious at first, just tiny fissures that I told myself were nothing to worry about. The way she'd sigh when I suggested we eat at home instead of going out. The way her enthusiasm dimmed when I mentioned I'd gotten a small raise at work that still left me firmly in the struggling category. The way she'd scroll through Instagram, staring at photos of other people's lavish lifestyles, her face clouded with something that looked like longing mixed with resentment. Then there were the comments around her friends. Amara's best friend, Thandai, worked in banking and dated a man who owned a successful logistics company. When the four of us went out together, which happened more often than I was comfortable with, I felt like I was being evaluated and found wanting. Thandai would make small comments about restaurants I couldn't afford, about vacation destinations that were so worth the money, about the importance of ambitious partners. And Amara would laugh along, sometimes glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Embarrassment? Apology? Calculation? I wasn't sure, but it made my stomach twist uncomfortably. Does it bother you that Thandai's boyfriend has more money than me? I asked her one night after another uncomfortable double date. What? No. Of course not, Amara said quickly. Too quickly. I love you for who you are, Thandai. Money doesn't matter to me. But her eyes didn't quite meet mine when she said it. And I felt the first real stirring of doubt. Still I pushed forward. I told myself I was being paranoid, that my past experiences were making me see problems where none existed. When I asked Amara to marry me, with a simple ring I'd saved 3 months to buy, she cried and said yes and held me like I was the most precious thing in the world. In that moment, I genuinely believed we'd be happy together. The wedding planning revealed more cracks, each one wider than the last. Amara wanted a big wedding. Huge. Hundreds of guests, an expensive venue, elaborate decorations. When I gently suggested we should keep it modest, keep it within our means, her face changed. This is my wedding, Thandai. Every woman dreams about her wedding day. Are you really going to deny me this? I'm not denying you anything, I said carefully. I'm just saying we should be realistic about what we can afford. What we can afford, she repeated bitterly. That phrase defines our entire relationship, doesn't it? What we can afford. What's cheap enough? What's good enough for people like us? People like us? I asked, stung by her tone. You know what I mean, she said, softening slightly. I want one day, Thandai. One perfect day where I don't have to worry about the price of things. Where I can feel special. Is that too much to ask? So I agreed. I told her we'd figure it out, that we'd make her dream wedding happen somehow. What I didn't tell her was that I'd contacted my trustees and arranged for a transfer from my trust fund to a separate account, enough to pay for the wedding she wanted. I told myself it was a gift, a way to make her happy, a small reveal of my true situation that I'd explain after the wedding. I had no idea I was funding my own public humiliation. 3 months before our wedding, I overheard a conversation that should have ended everything right there. But love, or what I thought was love, makes us blind to truths we don't want to see. I'd come to pick up Amara from Thandai's apartment. The door was slightly ajar and I heard their voices from inside before I knocked. Something in Amara's tone made me pause, made me stand there in the hallway like a thief, stealing pieces of truth I wasn't meant to hear. I just don't understand why you're settling, Amara. That was Thandai's voice, sharp with judgment. You're beautiful, you're educated, you could have any man in this city. And you chose? Thandai? A phone shop clerk. It's not settling, Amara replied, and I heard defensiveness in her voice. Thandai is good to me. He's kind. He's stable. Stable? He can barely afford to take you to a decent restaurant. There was a long pause. When Amara spoke again, her voice was quieter, more calculated. Look, not every man needs to start out successful. Some men just need the right woman to push them, to shape them into their potential. Thandai he's raw material. I can work with that. Raw material. The words pierced through my chest like shards of glass. So you're going to fix him? Thandai laughed. Like a renovation project? Why not? Amara's voice gained confidence. He's got a degree. He's not stupid. He just lacks ambition, lacks polish. Once we're married, I'll push him to find a better job, to dress better, to network with the right people. I'll make him into someone impressive. And honestly, Thandai, a man who starts with nothing and becomes successful because of you? That's a man who'll always be grateful. Who'll always know he owes his success to you. That's power. My hand was on the doorknob, ready to push it open, ready to confront this stranger wearing my fiancé's face. But I stopped. Because another, darker part of me wanted to see how far this would go. Wanted to collect evidence of who she truly was. Wanted to be absolutely certain before I made my next move. I quietly walked back down the hallway, waited 10 minutes, then called Amara's phone and told her I was running late. When I finally arrived, and knocked on Thandai's door, Amara greeted me with a bright smile and a kiss on the cheek, as if the conversation I'd just overheard had never happened. Ready to go, baby? She asked sweetly. Always, I replied, matching her false smile with one of my own. The next few months were torture. Every affectionate gesture from Amara felt like a performance. Every "I love you" sounded like a lie wrapped in pretty words. I watched her with new eyes, seeing all the small cruelties I'd been excusing or ignoring. The way she'd adjust my collar or smooth down my hair in public, as if I was a child who couldn't dress himself. The way she'd interrupt me when I was talking to her friends, finishing my stories but changing the details to make them more impressive or make herself look better. The way she'd scroll through my closet and sigh, saying things like, "After the wedding we really need to upgrade your wardrobe. I can't have my husband looking like this forever." My husband. As if I was a possession she'd acquired. A project she'd invested in. A before photo waiting to be transformed into an after photo she could show off. I thought about calling off the wedding. I should have called it off. But that same dark curiosity kept pulling me forward. I wanted to see what she'd do at the wedding itself. Would she continue the charade? Would she love me convincingly enough to hide her true feelings? Or would her mask slip? I got my answer during the wedding planning meetings. Amara insisted on writing her own wedding speech, which was unusual but not unheard of. When I asked what she planned to say, she smiled mysteriously. "It's a surprise, baby. Trust me, it'll be perfect." Something in that smile made my skin crawl. But I nodded and smiled back and said I couldn't wait to hear it. 2 weeks before the wedding, my mother called. She'd been respecting my wishes to stay distant from my experiment, but her worry had finally overcome her patience. "Tendai, I've been hearing things about this woman you're marrying," she said carefully. "I hired someone to do some background checks. Please don't be angry, and what I'm hearing concerns me deeply." "What kind of things?" I asked, though I already knew. "She tells her friends you're her project. That she's going to fix you and make you successful. She's not marrying you because she loves you, my son. She's marrying you because she thinks she can mold you into what she wants. And when she discovers who you really are." "When she discovers who I really am," I interrupted quietly, "she's going to realize she made the worst mistake of her life." "So you're going through with it? Even knowing all this?" "Especially knowing all this," I replied. "Mama, I spent 3 years living as a regular person hoping to find genuine love. Instead, I found someone who looked at me and saw raw material. Someone who claimed to love me while secretly being ashamed of me. Someone who's about to stand up at our wedding and reveal exactly who she is in front of everyone we know. Yes, I'm going through with it. Because some lessons can only be taught through experience. And Amara needs to learn a very important lesson about karma." My mother was silent for a long moment. "Are you doing this out of love or out of revenge?" "I honestly don't know anymore," I admitted. "Maybe both. Maybe neither. But it's too late to stop now. The wheels are already in motion." And they were. The wedding invitations had been sent. The venue was booked and paid for, secretly, by me. The dress was bought. The guests had confirmed. Everything was arranged for the performance of a lifetime. What Amara didn't know was that she wasn't the director of this play. She was just an actor who'd forgotten she was being watched by someone who knew the ending before the first scene had even begun. Our wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Sunny skies, a gentle breeze, the kind of day that appears in magazines and makes people believe in fairy tales. I woke up in my small apartment one last time, staring at the ceiling, feeling strangely calm. Today everything would change. Today truth would have its moment. I put on my wedding suit, a simple rented tuxedo that fit well enough but wasn't tailored. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Not because of how I looked but because of what I'd become. 3 years ago, I'd been naive enough to believe that if I stripped away my wealth, I'd find pure love. Now I understood that wealth isn't the corrupting factor, human nature is. Money just reveals what was already there. The ceremony was beautiful. The church in Kampala was decorated exactly as Amara had dreamed. White roses everywhere, gold accents, candles creating soft light throughout the space. 300 guests filled the pews, most of them people I barely knew. Amara had wanted a big audience and she'd gotten one. When Amara walked down the aisle toward me, she looked stunning. Her wedding dress was elaborate and expensive, paid for by her father and, secretly, subsidized by funds I'd transferred to make it possible. Her smile was radiant. Her eyes shone with tears of joy. To everyone watching, we were the perfect couple. The beautiful bride and her humble groom, a love story about a woman who chose character over wealth. If only they knew. We exchanged vows. I meant every word I said, or at least I meant them about the version of Amara I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago before I understood who she really was. When I placed the ring on her finger, I felt something close to grief. This could have been real. This could have been beautiful. If only she'd loved me instead of seeing me as something to fix. The reception was held at an expensive hotel ballroom, another detail Amara had insisted on. As guests filed in and found their seats, as the DJ started playing music and the catering staff began serving food, I watched Amara work the room. She was in her element, smiling, laughing, accepting compliments on her dress and the venue and the decorations. This was her day, her performance, her moment to shine. The speeches began after dinner. Amara's father spoke first, giving his blessing and welcoming me into their family with kind words that made my chest ache with guilt for what was coming. Her mother cried happy tears and talked about how proud she was of her daughter. Thandai, as maid of honor, gave a speech full of inside jokes and barely concealed references to how Amara had settled for me but was going to make it work. Then it was Amara's turn to speak. She stood up, microphone in hand, her face glowing with confidence. The room fell quiet, everyone turning to listen to the bride's words. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, my face neutral, waiting for the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating for months. Thank you all for being here to celebrate with us, Amara began warmly. This is truly the happiest day of my life. I never imagined I could feel this blessed, this complete. Tendai has been. She paused and I saw her smile sharpen into something else, such a journey. A few people chuckled, thinking she was setting up something sweet. She wasn't. You know, marriage is about accepting someone for who they are, right? Taking them as they come, flaws and all. Her voice took on a strange edge. And Tendai certainly comes with, let's call them unique qualities. My heart started beating faster. Here it comes. Like these shoes. She gestured toward my feet and suddenly everyone was looking at me. These are the same shoes Tendai wore when we first met 3 years ago. Same. I've watched them get more worn, more scuffed, more, shall we say, experienced? But he just keeps wearing them. And you know what I realized? She paused for dramatic effect. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others leaned forward, curious where this was going. I realized that these shoes are a perfect metaphor for our relationship. They're not fancy. They're not impressive. They're not going to make anyone jealous on Instagram. She laughed and a few people joined in nervously. But they're what we can afford right now. And that's okay. Because marriage isn't about having the best shoes or the nicest car or the biggest house. It's about potential. It's about partnership. It's about one person seeing another person's limitations and saying, I can work with this. The room had gone very quiet now. People were exchanging glances. I could feel their pity radiating toward me in waves. So here's my promise to my new husband, Amara continued, her voice stronger now, more assured. I promise to push you to be better, to dress better, to earn better, to be more ambitious, more successful, more impressive. I promise to train you, she actually used that word, train, like I was a dog performing tricks, to train you to be the man you're capable of becoming. Because right now you're just raw material, baby. And I'm going to shape you into something beautiful. She raised her glass. To my project husband. May the renovation begin. Some people applauded, though it was scattered and uncomfortable. Others just stared, shocked by what they'd witnessed. Thandai was filming everything on her phone, probably already composing the Instagram caption in her head. And I sat there, feeling something inside me turn to ice. Not anger. Not even hurt anymore. Just cold, absolute certainty that what I was about to do was not only justified, it was necessary. Amara sat down next to me, flushed with adrenaline, clearly proud of her honest and empowering speech. She squeezed my hand under the table. That wasn't too harsh, was it? She whispered. I just wanted to be real, you know? I squeezed her hand back and smiled. It was perfect, I said quietly. Absolutely perfect. Now it's my turn. I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room turn toward me. My hands were steady as I took the microphone from the DJ. Amara looked up at me with curiosity but no concern. After all, what could her humble project husband possibly say that would match her inspiring speech? Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, my voice calm and clear. I know it's late and many of you are ready to head home. But there are some things I need to say. Some truths that need to be spoken. I paused, looking around the room. 300 faces stared back at me. Some bored. Some curious. Some still looking at me with pity after Amara's speech. None of them had any idea what was coming. My wife, the word tasted bitter on my tongue, gave a very revealing speech just now. Very honest. Very authentic. She talked about my shoes, about my limitations, about her plans to train me and fix me and turn me into something better than what I am. And I appreciate that honesty, I really do. Because honesty is important in a marriage. So let me return the favor. Amara's smile began to falter. I saw confusion flicker across her face. These shoes, I said looking down at my feet, that Amara has mentioned so many times. The ones she sees as symbols of my poverty, my lack of ambition, my need to be trained. Let me tell you about these shoes. I lifted my foot slightly so people could see them better. They looked ordinary. Or cheap even. Perfect for the role I'd been playing. I bought these shoes 6 years ago in Milan, Italy. They were handmade by a master craftsman named Giuseppe Ferretti, who creates approximately 40 pairs per year for a very specific clientele. They cost €4,000, which for those keeping track, is roughly 20 million Ugandan shillings. They're made from Italian leather that's been treated with a special process that makes them incredibly durable and comfortable. That's why I've kept wearing them. Not because I couldn't afford new ones, but because they're quite possibly the finest shoes I've ever owned. The room had gone completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Amara's face had drained of all color. But Amara didn't know that, I continued softly. She never asked. She just assumed. Just like she assumed she knew everything about me based on where I worked and how I dressed and what kind of apartment I lived in. Tendai, what are you? Amara started to stand, but I gently motioned for her to sit. Something in my expression made her obey. 3 years ago, I said, addressing the room now, my father passed away. His name was Chikira Okonkwo. Some of you might recognize that name. He built one of the largest telecommunications networks in East Africa. He owned real estate across 5 countries. When he died, I inherited everything, his companies, his properties, his investments. Everything. I heard gasps around the room. Saw people pulling out their phones, probably already Googling my father's name. Saw Thandai's phone drop from her hand onto the table with a clatter. I inherited approximately $47 million, I continued, my voice still calm, still measured. Plus numerous properties, business holdings, and investments. I was 26 years old, and I had more money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes. Amara had started shaking. Her mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. But I was also heartbroken and cynical and convinced that no one would ever love me for who I actually was. They'd only love what I could give them. So I made a decision. I placed my entire inheritance into a trust with very specific instructions. For 5 years, I would receive only a modest monthly allowance. The rest would be completely inaccessible to me, managed by trustees who had strict orders not to reveal my true financial situation to anyone. I looked directly at Amara now. Her eyes were wide with horror, with realization, with the dawning understanding of what she'd done. Then I moved to Kampala, I said quietly. I rented a small apartment. I got a regular job. I lived like an ordinary person, hoping, desperately hoping, to find someone who could love Tendai the man, not Tendai the heir. Someone who would value my character, my heart, my soul, rather than my bank account. Tears were streaming down Amara's face now, but I couldn't tell if they were from shame or from realizing what she'd lost. Probably both. And I thought I'd found that person when I met you, Amara. I truly did. You were beautiful and ambitious and smart, and when you laughed at my jokes in that phone shop 3 years ago, I felt hope for the first time since my father died. I thought, maybe she's the one. Maybe she'll prove that real love exists. My voice cracked slightly, the first sign of emotion breaking through my careful control. But piece by piece you showed me who you really were. The comments about my clothes. The size when I couldn't afford expensive restaurants. The embarrassment you felt around your friends. I heard you, Amara. I heard you tell Thandai that I was raw material, that you could shape into something impressive. I heard you say that a man who starts with nothing and becomes successful because of you is a man who'll always be grateful, always know he owes you. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a project. You wanted control. I didn't mean it like that, Amara sobbed, but her voice was weak, unconvincing even to her own ears. Yes, you did, I said firmly but not unkindly. You meant every word. And tonight, you proved it in front of everyone here. You stood up with that microphone and you humiliated me. You mocked me. You talked about training me like I was something broken that needed fixing. You did that knowing, or thinking you knew, that I had nothing. That I was vulnerable. That I was beneath you. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the room. The trust one established becomes fully accessible in 6 weeks. $47 million, plus 3 years of investment growth, which my trustees tell me has been substantial. All of that could have been ours, Amara. If you'd simply loved me. If you'd respected me. If you'd valued who I was rather than judging what you thought I lacked. I took off my wedding ring and placed it gently on the table between us. But you couldn't do that. And because you couldn't, I now know with absolute certainty that our marriage, this marriage we just entered into, is built on a foundation of judgment, mockery, and conditional love. And I won't live like that. I won't spend my life with someone who sees me as a project rather than a partner. The silence in the ballroom was suffocating. 300 people sat frozen, witnessing the most intimate and devastating moment of two lives unraveling in real time. Some had their phones out, recording. Others just stared with expressions ranging from shock to satisfaction to horror. This was the kind of drama people would talk about for years. Amara's face had gone through every shade of human emotion: shock, denial, grief, and now, finally, desperate panic. She reached for my arm, her hands trembling. "Tendai, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't do this. Not here. Not like this. We can talk about this privately. We can work through this. I love you. I do love you." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. How had I convinced myself that I loved this woman? Or had I just loved the idea of her? The hope she represented? "Do you love me, Amara?" I asked softly. "Or do you love what you thought I could become? Because those are very different things." She opened her mouth but no words came out. What could she say? We both knew the answer. I turned back to the crowd. "I'm filing for an annulment next week. Given that this marriage was entered into under false pretenses, with her believing I was poor when I'm actually wealthy, and given that we haven't consummated this marriage, it should be straightforward legally. The wedding has been paid for. Consider it a gift, Amara. You got your dream wedding. I hope it was worth it." "You did this on purpose." Amara's voice suddenly cut through, sharp and bitter. She stood up, her tears drying as anger took over. "You manipulated me. You lied to me for 3 years. You made me think you were poor, and now you're punishing me for reacting honestly to the situation you created? You're the villain here, Tendai. Not me." A few people nodded. She had a point, even if it wasn't the whole truth. "You're absolutely right," I said, and saw surprise flicker across her face. "I did deceive you. I absolutely manipulated the situation to test you. And that was wrong of me. I own that completely." I paused, letting that acknowledgement hang in the air. "But Amara, here's the crucial difference. I lied about having money. You lied about having love. I hid my wealth to see if you could value me without it. You hid your judgment and contempt behind smiles and sweet words. My deception was about circumstances. Yours was about character. And one of those things can be forgiven. The other cannot." Her face crumpled again, all the fight draining out of her. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said, and meant it. "I wanted you to prove me wrong. I wanted you to love me so genuinely, so completely, that when I revealed my wealth, it would just be a happy surprise. A fairy tale ending. But you couldn't do it. And I need you to understand, this isn't revenge. This is just consequence. This is karma." I looked around the room one final time. "I apologize to all of you for this scene. It wasn't my intention to ruin anyone's evening or create a spectacle. But sometimes the truth demands witnesses. Sometimes lessons can only be learned through public reckoning." I started walking toward the exit. The crowd parted automatically, people stepping back as if heartbreak was contagious. Behind me, I heard Amara start to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that echoed through the ballroom. Part of me wanted to turn back, to comfort her, to take it all back. But I kept walking. Just before I reached the door, I heard Thandai's voice, sharp and accusing. "You're cruel. You destroyed her in front of everyone. You could have just broken up with her privately. I don't know if you'll read this letter or immediately throw it away. I don't know if you hate me or if you've moved past all of this. But I wanted you to know that I don't hate you. I forgive you. And I hope, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, that you've forgiven yourself. That you've learned from this the same way I have. That you're becoming someone who loves people for who they are, not for what you can make them into. We destroyed each other, Amara. But maybe from those ashes, we can both grow into better versions of ourselves. Maybe that was the lesson all along. I wish you peace, happiness, and genuine love. Tendai." I never received a response, and I didn't expect one. But writing it helped me close that chapter. Helped me accept that some relationships exist solely to teach us what we need to learn, even if they destroy us in the process. Eventually, I met someone new. Her name was Zainab, and she was a professor of literature at the University of Nairobi. She knew exactly who I was, knew about my wealth, knew about the viral wedding disaster. And she chose to date me anyway, not despite those things but with full awareness of them. "I'm not interested in fixing you or changing you or making you into anything," she told me on our third date. "I'm interested in knowing you. In seeing who you actually are beneath all the trauma and the tests and the defenses. If that person interests me, great. If not, we'll part as friends. But I'm not here to project my fantasies onto you or turn you into my ideal man. I have a whole life already. You'd be adding to it, not completing it. Those words healed something in me I didn't know was still broken. Our relationship built slowly, carefully, on foundations of honesty and mutual respect and genuine curiosity about each other. We fought sometimes. We disagreed often. But we never mocked each other. We never treated each other as projects. We saw each other, truly saw each other, and chose each other anyway. That's what love actually is. Not the fairy tale. Not the perfect match. Not someone who completes you or fixes you or turns you into your best self. Just someone who sees you clearly, accepts you fully, and chooses to stand beside you while you both become better versions of yourselves. Amara couldn't give me that. But more importantly, I couldn't give it to her either. We were both too broken, too defensive, too busy testing and judging to actually love. The wedding that ended in disaster taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. You cannot find real love while wearing a mask. You cannot test someone's character while hiding your own. You cannot build intimacy on deception, even if your deception seemed justified. The only path to genuine connection is radical honesty, about who you are, what you have, what you fear, what you want. It's terrifying. It makes you vulnerable. It opens you up to being hurt, used, rejected. But it's also the only way to ever truly know if someone loves you. And that knowledge, painful as it can be, is worth everything. So here's my question for you, sitting there watching this video, maybe judging me or judging Amara or judging us both. How authentic are you in your relationships? If this story touched something deep in your heart, if it made you think about your own relationships differently, if it helped you see yourself or someone you know more clearly, I need to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been judged for not being enough? Have you ever been someone's project rather than their partner? Or maybe you've been the one doing the judging, the one trying to fix someone instead of accepting them? Share your story. This community needs to hear it. Someone needs to hear it. Your truth might be exactly what